Hi guys, welcome back to The Social Tune, and today we are finally taking a look at the latest album by Perfume Genius, aka Mike Hadrius, No Shape.
Oh, love will never break the shape we take. Oh, baby, let all them voices slip away.
So in case you missed it, I've been playing catch-up for a lot of albums recently. This is because the mid-year's coming up and I need to have my list of the best albums and the best songs of the year so far ready by then. And because of this, I almost considered skipping this album entirely, because frankly, Perfume Genius is an extremely fascinating and complex performer to me. I first discovered him back in 2014 when he released Too Bright, an absolute masterpiece of an album and easily one of the best of that year. And one of the reasons why was because of how defiantly unique that album was, even within Mike's own discography. It was loud and bombastic with some of his most opulent production to date, especially on the huge single Queen, which launched him into the public spotlight. And his new album was said to be even more bombastic and eclectic, so I wasn't sure if I'd even have time for it. But eventually I gave in, braced myself, and dived in. And on my first few listens, I had absolutely no idea what to make of this project. I had no idea what it was about, the sound was defiantly unique, and the entire experience took a lot of adjustment on my part. And today, I think I'm finally ready to dive in deep and review this sucker. So let's start with Mike Hadrius' vocals. I'll be blunt, this is one of the most compelling singers working today. His voice has a ragged quality to it, yet his falsetto is strong. He conveys emotion and vulnerability beautifully, and yet when he's angry, the power that radiates from him is undeniable. This is a guy who has regularly called out Eminem for his homophobic content, including promoting his 2014 tour with Feminem t-shirts, which depicted Slim Shady in drag. You have to have balls to do that, especially with how M's fans get on Twitter, but I digress. On this album, he takes things to a whole new level, as he sings his heart out on the inspirational jaw-droppers Just Like Love and Slip Away, especially with the multi-tracking and the reverb effect on his voice on the former gorgeous song. Then you have his quivering tones on the opening track, Otherside, as he manages to convey a haunting combination of wonder and dread. Although that's nothing compared to his muffled tones on Choir, where he sounds entirely overwhelmed by the majesty of what he's witnessing. It's the moment where he feels at his smallest on the album, where all that power that we're usually used to seeing is stripped away, leaving him raw and vulnerable and quivering. It's a haunting moment, but it's so awesome. Or take his loving, tender tone on Alan, the song that he wrote for his boyfriend, who the track is also named after. And then you have his downright sultry tones on Die For You, fitting for a song that bleeds sex from every single pore. And the same can also be said for Run Me Through, which is a straight-up fantasy about being handled like a plaything in the bedroom. Mike is just incredible across this album. But as great as he sounds on sides, the moment where that beat switches up and Waze Blood's vocals rings out completely blows the first half of that track out of the water. She sounded fantastic. And I will say, although he doesn't sound bad by any means, I wasn't a huge fan of his cadence on Braid, not helped by the fact that that song really didn't stand out at all outside of that cadence. But to back up all of that power, you need some damn great instrumentals to go along with it. Okay, I saw several reviews of this album saying that the instrumentation was too lush and too up its own ass. But fuck those reviews, this is mine, and I say this album sounds fantastic. While his last album was filled with sharper grooves and thundering guitars, this album's production is lush and grand in the best way possible, while still flooded with distortion to give it that extra grit that the best of Perfume Genius's output has. From the gorgeous strings that show up on Just Like Love and Every Night, to the 80s synth-pop inspired groove on Wreath, with its ascending keys and deeper guitar foundation sounding amazing and reminding me more than a little bit of Bleacher's Strange Desire from 2014. Then you have the moment that looping piano line on Otherside is broken up by that explosion of gleaming keys and bells. It sounded downright magical, which then happens again to even greater effect on Slip Away, especially with those thumping drums giving the song a fantastic groove. Or take the incredibly sharp violin, the echoing effects, and the distant gospel vocals on Choir. Even the restraint on Braid gave the song some great sizzling power, especially with those guitars at the back of the mix. Even though in terms of restrained yet still grandiose production, it doesn't come close to the cellos on Alan. Even the blockier beat on Go Ahead managed to work for me, especially when it switched up to the more electronic cadence with the gleaming keys. I will say though, even though I did love the bells and the keys, I didn't really feel the guitars meshed very well with the rest of the instrumentation on sides, where I really did prefer the more dream pop inspired back half of the song, although that may be because it was preceded by the deeply erotic Die For You, which was mostly produced on an electric piano, but which picks up some percussion and some breathy multi-track vocals on the back half. It sounded great. But at the end of the day, let's get to the part that I struggled with the most, the content and the lyrics.
Limit every second left till I'm off balance.
So in every interview I've read, Mike Hadrius has said this isn't so much an album where he gives a middle finger to those who would judge him like we saw on Too Bright, and instead focusing on a much more personal struggle. Namely, the choice he has to make between a normal life and the incredibly transcendent power that he sometimes feels he could reach. Hell, the closest that he ever comes to achieving it is through his music. On Otherside and Every Night, he invokes that reality, on the latter outright begging it to reveal itself to him. After all, on Wreath, it's described as the paradise that he's always searched for, the one that people like, say, the Catholic Church wouldn't grant him because of his sexuality, which he tears apart on Go Ahead, while also encouraging those in similar positions to do the same on songs like Slip Away and Just Like Love. And yet, despite all of that, on Choir, the power makes him shrink back in fear, as its magnificence is just too much for him to handle. Which is why he reverts back to his most basic human instincts on Die For You, a song about autoerotic asphyxiation, one of the most extreme sexual acts that one can perform, and which he describes as the most honest and purest expression of love, at least physically. And then the final track makes clear that he's making the decision to stay in our realm of reality, abandoning that higher power to stay with his boyfriend. Now that's all great, but the one aspect that ironically had me torn was on sides, where he's trying to choose between his lover and this higher power. And at first, I was kind of indignant that he made it seem like such a hard choice. But once I got over the defiantly hopeless romantic inside of me, I saw it from his point of view. For a guy who's always been judged for just being himself, who suffers from anxiety and who's been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, any escape from that reality must seem like heaven, especially considering that, once again, he was denied the actual heaven. It's a scared human reaction, especially when he finds out that he's in over his head and escapes back to Earth, to Alan. This is the weakest that Mike has ever allowed himself to appear on one of his albums, and hell, if anything, it'll only bring him closer to both transcendence and his lover alike.
Dream. Something keeps me.
So at the end of the day, after many listens, I can't deny just how stunningly beautiful this project is. In its themes, its composition, its performance, its writing. Is it surreal? Sure, but it's simultaneously grounded in real human emotions, which makes it a gorgeous, personal, and intensely relatable listen. So no surprise, it's a 9 out of 10. Perfume Genius lived up to his stage name yet again and knocked it out of the park. I sat on this album for the longest time, but once it clicked for me, it was so worth it. And so in the same way, I'm encouraging all of you to go listen to it and let it marinate for a while before making your final decision. Because if you do, you may be the one to find something transcendent in the process. So thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. If there are any other albums coming out in the next month or so, please post them in the comments or tweet them at me at @thesocialtune, link in the description. Please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tune, signing off.